we ran out of. We had to. I didn't bring the extra battery, and so we actually ran out of juice before we could actually finish the conversation. Although the conversation was actually great, unfortunately, we didn't put a lot of it on camera. So um, that's why Paige actually come to these in person. Anyway, uh, welcome to another Bob the Father. We had a little hiatus for a couple weeks, but we have some people here, so good. So again, this is an open forum, open question about anything you like to talk about. It doesn't have to be faith related. It could be anything personally, or just like, hey, Father, what are you doing this about? Or why are you doing this here at the parish, or this policy, whatever. That's cool. That's what this is really directed towards. So feel free.
Why did you?
Well, that was great.
I have a question.
Yeah, Kathy,
I always
yeah.
have questions. Why did you start your homily out with the Exorcist movie?
Yeah. So,
Kind of.
well, I think it was appropriate to the gospel that day. So the fourth Sunday of ordinary time, Jesus. It's fitting that Jesus starts his ministry with an exorcism in the book of Mark. So I think it was kind of appropriate as far as like, well, hey, that still happens, right?
Mhm,
And it happens probably more than you think,
mhm.
unfortunately. Um, Maybe many people don't, and maybe I could touch this in a homily, but you only have 7 minutes, but or 10, depending on who you are, or 20, depending on who you are too, yeah, or 5. Um, so every diocese in the world has a dedicated exorcist.
Right.
And the identity of that exorcist is supposed to remain anonymous, although there have been certain exorcists recently. I guess they haven't said which diocese they're from or whatever, but I mean, there's kind of supposed to remain secret for good reason,
Mhm.
right? So we have one in St. Louis. That's all I'll say. But there's something. I mean, obviously, I do pray over my homilies quite a bit. Every time I start with Lectio Divina. I do every time I do research. Every time I start writing and editing, I always do it in the context of prayer. And that's one thing I was asserting. I asked several people, I'm like, do you think this would be appropriate? And the feedback I got was, yeah, what you're basically saying here seems right. I mean, obviously, I didn't go into much detail about the exorcist itself because part of that is because we don't really actually know for sure all that happened, right? So there's not a lot of information as far as between what the movie kind of uh, depicted and then actually what actually occurred in those rooms over the course of 3 months. There's testimony, and I would imagine that testimony would be true about um, but that also has been sort of what has been observed in other exorcisms. What I mentioned in the homily, that oftentimes there is some knowledge that the victim had no way of knowing, right? There was some strength that's actually exhibited that needs to be restrained, and usually there are also sometimes things that happened on the skin of the victim, or the twists or turns, or and what's kind of funny is that was kind of what happened to the victim in the gospel, right?
I was just wondering why the movie.
Well, I mean, it was more a hook.
Okay.
I mean, I could have really done
Okay.
any one, but I think that
Okay.
was something that probably
People would
most
know.
people knew, right? Even,
Touching
Pay
parable.
attention.
right, yeah, right. So, I mean, that was really more of I mean, it could have been like the Extras of Emily Rose, or it could have been, any one, really. But, yeah, one thing I tend to do in my homiletics is I try to do something topical to kind of get the hook and apply it. And oftentimes that also means I go back to old homilies, and I try to be. I mean, what I mean by that is I go back and look at homilies I've done in the past on that gospel, and I try to be original. So if I've already done something, I try not to do it again.
Unless it's really good. It deserves repeating.
Well, see, sometimes we're our own worst critics, like Kathy. So like usually when I go back and look, it's like, oh, man. I then you start like, oh, I probably should have said this different or whatever. But also too, I think I'm at a point in my priesthood where it's like it would be cheap, right? I mean, so I don't critique anyone for using old homilies. I think that's a good, especially when you're going to a congregation that hasn't heard before. I think it could be good. I just think though I need to build up that muscle,
Gotcha.
right, before I actually
yeah.
start doing that in some ways, right? Yeah. So I try to be somewhat original in the way I approach my homilies. And I've never preached on The Exorcist before, so it was the first time.
It was a topic of conversation for a while.
Good. That's what homily should do.
The Exorcist, the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's funny. I have been on this kind of 2-week kick of like doing more film reviews, but I don't know. Like also like even like last week I had The Bells of St. Mary's, and I don't know how many. I don't know how many people have actually seen that movie. It's a good movie.
Yeah.
And again, but I think it also kind of applied. I think it kind of applied to the gospel, right?
Yeah.
So I try to do that. I try to connect something people that would know with what's actually happening in the gospel too.
Okay.
Yeah, we heard about
Yeah.
it, but we didn't get to. It was the Holy Spirit for that.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Well, it was funny because
No, Michael said it was good.
we had a parishioner who at the 11 o'clock mass had an episode, and my first thought was like, was it the homily? So he's fine, but everything's fine. But the person came up to me after this past week. He's like, "That's our favorite movie. Watch every Christmas." I'm like, "Oh, that's great." So
Bells of St. Mary's.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, our families watch it every Christmas too, and
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about it, it's not really a Christmas movie. I mean, there are Christmas scenes in it,
yeah.
but it's like, I mean, it's the climax really happens in the spring, so it's kind of interesting. Yeah, it is. It is a very vocational movie. As a matter of fact, in the seminary, Monsignor Witt had a whole lesson on that time, like movies and the church, and that time frame was like kind of a champion. It was like the epitome of the hero priest, and then things happened. So so it's kind of, it actually was it was a great lesson. It was very interesting. As Monsignor Witt's lectures usually are very interesting. So yeah.
You should have done a class on Going My Way.
I know, right? That actually is my favorite. I actually like that one better than saying that. And it's funny, you think it's not the Bing Crosby character I actually like. I actually prefer the Barry Fitzgerald character. The old like crank who's like just like, I built this place, leave me alone. It was just because also not just him as a person, but like his transformation. It's just like that he was open to that formation, which is, I think all priests can learn a lesson from that. Right. So yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
During Mass, during the Our Father, there are some that will hold hands and some that will take on the same posture as a priest. And I read somewhere where that might not be the real guidelines.
So, oh boy. This position, palms facing up, more shoulder. I mean, so actually, like the old form was like actually even more. I think it even gave like inches apart how the hand should be. But the real factor of what they call the orans position, right, the prayer position, it's called the high priestly position, would be palms facing up, right. Now with your arms elevated, hands elevated. That is only to be done by the priest, right? Because the priest is taking on the person of Christ, offering those prayers to the Father as the Son, right? And it's evident that the priest is the in persona Christi that is doing that action. He's the president. He's presiding over the liturgy. He's the one responsible for doing that. I mean, when we talk about these things liturgically, it's not like the Swiss guards are going to come in and arrest you and take you to prison if you're not following. But we don't necessarily look at like what is right and what's wrong. We really look at liturgy about what is proper and what is not, right? And so it wouldn't necessarily be proper for anyone other than the priest to do that position. And Our Father, the rubric is clear that the priest does this position. I mean, there are parts where maybe the lady could do that. So I mean, and the question is it truly orans? Because some families that might do this. Some people might do this. Is that truly orans? Not really. So I mean, there are distinctions made between that. And for those looking like put your hands out like that, plus your right, yeah. And so or like maybe like this, like they're holding hands. Again, there's when we talk about the things that are in the rubric and what's not. There we go. Welcome to another Bow to the Father. We're here in the dining room, of course, as always. Hopefully, maybe expand as time goes on and get more people. We'll see how that goes. So again, this is an open forum. For anyone who has a question, they're open to ask. Hopefully, I have an answer. And if I don't, I'll try to find one eventually. So, floor is open.
I've got a question, and it seems that over the recent times, say in the last 6 months to a year, there's been more use of incense and chanting, both in English and in Latin, and increased in Latin in general. And it's not just at this parish.
Yeah.
It's been, because I've been to some masses outside of this archdiocese, and there have been questions about that at those places too. So is this a new focus from the church, or is it just something that's kind of come full circle again?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit of both and. I mean, you know, when we look at, you know, these are, the thing about with incense in Latin is that isn't new, right? I mean, so I think a lot of this, and here's the thing, I want to be very charitable in the way I kind of maybe critique these things, because one thing I've always said is I think a lot of priests are products of the seminary they come from. And what I mean by that is, I think it's kind of interesting that the seminaries didn't actually have a overarching structure until 1997. So you think of like how many centuries people have been, you know, priests have been trained in these seminaries, and that's where the university system came from, right? Obviously, these formation of clergy. But before 1997, there was like no like overarching like here's how we're going to do it, right? As a matter of fact, it wasn't until the Council of Trent in the 1530s that actually seminaries were kind of promoted as being something that should be done by every area, right? And so, so you flash forward 500 years later with John Paul II, and now he puts out this document called Pastoro Dabo Vobis, which means I will give you shepherd. Again, Latin, right? The document's are always in Latin, because Latin is the mother tongue of the church. And I think what happened specifically after Vatican II, there was this spirit that was kind of promoted, and not necessarily what was actually came out of Vatican II. So where this all comes from, you know, so it's always good to kind of check down as far as why. First off, why can we do this? What is the rationale behind it? What is the purpose of it? And what is the actual explicit allowance for it, right? So the germ, for instance, so the germ is the general instruction of the Roman Missal. That calls for use of incense. Now, it doesn't say you have to use it, but a lot of things that came out of Vatican II is not necessarily things that were obligatory, but allowances. And so that's, I think, where a lot of this gets missed in some ways, right? So, like, for instance, the governing document that came out of Vatican II, which then allowed the germ, which made the missal, and so on and so forth, was called Sacrosanctum Concilium. And again, the Latin term means this sacred council. That's all. So whenever you read these documents, it's always the first like few words of the first sentence that actually names the document, right? So Sacrosanctum Concilium was the document that kind of governed this new liturgy that came out of Vatican II. Now, what's I think very interesting about Sacrosanctum Concilium is that it doesn't really change anything. So, for instance, several times it mentions in there that Latin is the mother tongue of the church and should be upheld and used within the liturgy. Several times it says chant is the most ancient form of worship in the liturgy and should be upheld. Even to the point where it says like the organ takes pride of place in liturgies, right? Now, again, it does allow that because maybe there's more modern structures that were built that don't necessarily accommodate an organ or these other things. So what that document said, there could be other allowances to be used that are properly oriented towards liturgy. And I think what happened sometimes after Vatican II is there was so much focus on these allowances that there wasn't necessarily a focus on the bulk and the traditions that the church was still upholding. It's actually kind of interesting in that same, in the same documents of Vatican II, when it talks about the Friday fast, the Friday abstaining, right? A lot of people don't know that was never remitted. That was never like, done away with. What the council did was say, yeah, look, you should still maintain this abstinence, but if you perform some other form of penance, yeah, have a cheeseburger, right? I mean, I don't say that explicitly, of course, but what it says is, the Friday is such an important day in the week. It's when our Lord sacrificed himself for us. We should mimic that in some way. And maybe that's not necessarily in abstaining from meat, but maybe it's, I don't know, not flipping somebody off when they cut you off in traffic, right? So what the document kind of does is it allows you to be the arbiter of that, which is kind of funny because during Lent, we kind of do the same thing, don't we? When we give things up or like do things for Lent, it's funny, when we get ready for Lent, I always tell like the kids and other people, it's like, we're not that far away right now. That when it comes to these Lenten practices, I'm not going to be over your shoulder like, hey, you said you're going to give up chocolates and it's Thursday, what are you doing? That's not my job. And nor would it necessarily be matter for confession, because you're the arbiter of it. If you want to let yourself off the hook on a Thursday, or maybe it's just a really, really hard day, and you're like, you know what, I really need a piece of chocolate right now, that's up to you, right? So in the same way we talk about these Friday, penances, that's up to you too, right? But what happened was we don't have to meet. The focus was we don't have to meet on Friday now. So okay, all bets are off. When that's not what that's not what Vatican II really said. In the same way, when it comes to these things, I think again there's this focus on what's allowed rather than what are these traditions. So when we talk about Latin, for instance, I think what people focused on when it comes to the Sacrosanctum Concilium is that the council did allow for use of vernacular, but even gives the rationale behind that, because it says, well, this is a little bit new, right? I mean, it's the same structure the Mass has always been there. You're always going to have liturgy of the Word. You're always going to have liturgy of the Eucharist. You're going to have, the opening prayers and the Eucharistic prayer and all that. That's always been the case, even from the time of the first century, right? We see that in the writings of the apostles and also the writings of the patristics, right? It's always been that way. But how that comes about, well, the church does different things. And so because this is something relatively new, although many think that the Novus Ordo, we call it the Novus Ordo, the new way, actually harkens back to the first house masses that were done in the first few centuries of Christianity.
And that's where they were usually done.
Correct. Or that, or like at graves. Because, again, we have to understand right underground. Exactly right.
Temple,
yeah. These were being done in secret because if you were a Christian, you died, right? So, house masses were a thing too. As a matter of fact, in the Holy Land, at Peter's house in Capernaum, there's a church there because this is when the Mass were being celebrated, right? But the focus there was on the vernacular because, well, look, this is going to be new, so that you understand what's going on, use the vernacular, right? But we always want to maintain that Latin is the mother tongue. And so it's very clear that the intention was always go back to Latin. Now, what happened was that we got so focused on vernacular, everyone forgot about Latin, to the point they were actually not teaching it in the seminary or anywhere else anymore. I remember when I was going through high school, I actually was kind of encouraging that many schools now are actually using Latin, providing Latin as a language, because when I was going through high school, that wasn't an option. I think there were maybe in two high schools. I think it was Priory and maybe Chaminade that were actually having Latin. The girls' schools, I don't know if there were any at the time.
It wasn't allowed. You had to have 2 years of it.
Well, right. Well, what I'm saying is that like CBC and other, that wasn't even an option. Latin was not even offered.
But it was before that.
Before that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Well, sure.
All right. Yeah.
Because that's what you get in the liturgy, right? And so what happened then was you got this catch-22. Well, we're not learning Latin anymore. Well, why not? We're not using liturgy. Why are we losing liturgy? Because we're not teaching Latin anymore, right? And so you get this kind of circular logic happening. Obviously, in the Novus Ordo, there are some compared to the extraordinary form, there are things in the Novus Ordo that aren't as explicit, right? And so if you went to the extraordinary form, you read like the germ, the general instruction for Roman Missal. It is, I mean, it spells out everything.
And that has changed too since it first came out.
The extraordinary form?
Yes.
Well, sure, yeah, right, yeah.
The
So,
germ.
right, yeah.
The germ.
Well, the germ, there was a new germ with the Novus Ordo.
Mm.
And so when the Novus Ordo came out, there were a lot of things that weren't in it that were in the extraordinary form. And so when it came, there was a liturgical, I don't want to say edict, but, maxim maybe, right? That if something was ambiguous in the Novus Ordo, you would defer to the extraordinary form, provided it wasn't conflicting, right? So in other words, there are certain vestments that we wore in the extraordinary form that wouldn't be proper for the Novus Ordo, right? In particular, what they call maniple. So the maniple is every garment has a theological and also a practical use, right? So the maniple, the practical use is really more of a sweat rack, but it's also a symbol of service, right? Which is why a subdeacon in the extraordinary form could wear the maniple, right? That's a symbol of the clergy. But there's no maniple in the Novus Ordo, right? So it wouldn't be proper or appropriate to wear a maniple in the Novus Ordo. In the same way, when we talk about the Orans position, there's nothing explicit in the German saying that a layperson can't do the Orans position. But it is very clear in the rubric of the Missal that it's just saying the priest, not all. Because in those instructions, the rubric does make the distinction between the priest does this, or everyone does this, or whatever.
I think that it became a divide when it used to be the common thing to hold hands, and then it came out, no, you really shouldn't hold hands anymore. They wanted to get away from the holding hands. And so people just did this, lifting, like a praise and worship kind of stance.
Right.
And that's where it came from.
And there might be some of a Protestant influence in that too.
When we were instructed though to hold hands and to raise them, held.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, but again, there's nothing. But that's what I'm saying. There's nothing that. So there's another way you can look at this liturgically, saying that, well, if it's not explicit, it must be okay, right? So there are always these like kind of competing theories when it comes to, especially more expressly in the Novus Ordo, because well, if it doesn't say it, that means you can. But then there are others, and I'm kind of in this camp. If it doesn't say it, what are they doing in the previous masses? Before the Novus Ordo. And I think that's much more of a connection with the tradition of the church than just say, let's just do whatever we want. Well, I mean, again, there's nothing explicit to say you can't, but if we're looking back as the liturgy is an organic thing that grew from tradition that we've had, it makes sense we have that connection with the tradition that we've had instead of being more innovative in that. There's ways you can be innovative even within that tradition. But again, it always has to be within the guidance and the approval of the church too. So again, I'm not going to like, hey, by the way, you shouldn't do that. I mean, that wouldn't be proper to do, but because everyone receives in different ways. But also, if you're looking strictly as what is between what the laity does and what the minister does, there is a distinction there. So. Yeah, I mean, one thing I've instructed servers that when they're serving, it's okay if you want to do this or hold hands. I'm not going to say no, but there's nothing wrong with doing this too, right? So that's kind of the instruction, I think. Yeah, it's difficult because when people are kind of in their ways, it's really hard to change that, and so no one also it wouldn't be very pastoral to say, well, you want to meet people where they are and try to elevate them, right? And I think when people understand the reasoning behind things, they start to say, oh, maybe I should look at that a different way.
Given those things that aren't going to detract
Right.
from the mass.
Right. But I mean, some people can also find that distracting. I don't know.
No more distracting than sign of peace.
Maybe not, but even the sign of peace is sort of like a different, there's, what the rubric says explicitly is kiss of peace, but based on custom, right, there can be some other form of sign of peace.
just really supposed to be your neighbors, not like
Yeah.
people that get out of the pews
Yes,
and
I
go up
mean,
and down
right,
the
and so
aisle.
that's really more of like kind of a unification of the body of Christ. That as you give the sign of peace to your neighbor, that flows out, right? And it's funny because like technically speaking, I shouldn't be giving the sign of peace to anyone else after I say the peace of the Lord with you always, with your spirit, right? Because I've already done that,
Mhm.
right? So there's no need for me to do it again because I already did to everyone there, right? But everyone else hasn't done it, so
But
okay.
it doesn't say not to.
Again, so, and even in that respect, like, you know, if you what we've done in the past, well, the priest would just say Dominus vobiscum et cum spiritu, and then he would go about his business of the communion rite, right? So, you know, the sign of peace really wasn't done by the congregation in the old rite,
Mm-mm.
but the Novus Ordo is explicit that yeah, you can do that. It doesn't say you should; it says you can, right? Which is why that also can be optional. I mean, we saw that during COVID. That you know that the sign of peace is an optional right. You can do it, or if pastoral circumstances allow, don't. Okay.
Yeah, I think St. Anne's does it okay, but some parishes have people getting out of the pews, going back several pews.
Yeah, and
I think you have to know your congregation
Well-
too, because there are some churches that is their tradition.
and that's the key,
Yeah.
because when we talk about tradition,
Yeah.
there's a canonical term called MOS, MOS. So if there was a particular church, meaning a parish, that had a tradition that was known by the local ordinary, meaning the vicar general or the bishop, or especially the archbishop, knew this was going on, and it was going on for 35 years consecutively, it then by law becomes a tradition of the parish. And that could be an example, right?
It
So
could be,
yeah, right.
except
So
that would be a distraction to the
Yeah.
Eucharist.
it may be, but again, the local
Right.
ordinary is the one to make that determination. And so if the
Right.
local ordinary says stop that, okay, done, we're good, no longer boss. It stops at that point.
So people coming here from other countries have other traditions
Sure.
too.
Right.
And the Africans, be on the west coast or the east coast of Africa, all bring their other traditions too.
Well, I'll say when I was in Taipei, I mean, obviously the tradition there is bowing.
Mhm.
There would be no touch; it would just be bow.
Mhm.
Fine, you know. And again, there's cultural adaptations that can be. That's why I think it allows for those things. But
Yeah.
again, if the local ordinary says we're going to do this instead, okay, cool, you know, or what you're doing is inappropriate, okay, done, right? Now they may still do it, but it could not be considered a tradition of the church because the local ordinary had knowledge of it and he actually explicitly said don't. Right? So in that case, it would be illicit.
Years ago, I was at a mass at Most Holy Trinity Church.
Oh, sure. Yeah, down in Eureka.
No,
No,
by the
in St.
Grand Water Tower.
St.
Oh,
Highway 70,
okay,
Most
okay,
Holy
all right.
Trinity in the inner city.
You're thinking most Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Most
okay.
Holy- yeah.
And the sign of peace went on for 15
Yes.
minutes. I was a guest there, and
Yes.
it was like, what are these people doing? And the presider walked back to the altar, and everybody got back in their pews.
At an ordination. Okay, I won't say where this is or who this was. I will just say that at the time I was a seminarian. I was at an ordination, not in this diocese, different diocese. And it was close enough that because I had some responsibilities later that day, that I was planning to duck out early, so to speak, if I could, or if I needed to. So in that respect, I was closer to the back of the nave, right? I was kind of just, and a friend of mine was sitting there because he had other responsibilities that day too, and so we would always be there for a friend of ours that we knew, but then we were planning to leave whenever, if it got too long or whatever, because ordinations can be long. Well, as we were there, the bishop, and I think now it's starting to be broken in some ways. So I'll just tell you my personal experience when it came to the extraordinary form of the Mass, which is the Mass you'll see at places like Francis de Sales, and at St. Luke. Well, now
What
called
we
the
grew
Oratory.
up with.
The one prior to 1970, right? Or really 1963.
1965.
Yeah.
Right.
So when I first experienced, I was in seminary, right? I grew up in a Novus Ordo parish. Now, the pastor there, I think, was a little more traditional in his bent, so he wouldn't mind using incense and that kind of thing
Where
too.
did you grow up?
Immaculate Heart of Mary in South City.
South City.
Yeah.
City.
So
Okay.
my pastor, from the time we moved into that parish when I was 2 until I was about 14 years old, was Father Richard Nelke. So
Any
Father,
relation to Nelke, Father Nelke now?
there's a Father Nelke now.
Yeah, when he had
thought
he was
there
at
was,
Holy
yeah.
Trinity. Yeah, yeah. There's I think.
He's
Maybe
the only
it's
Father
not.
Nelke I know.
Okay.
But he passed away in like 2008. So he's been, yeah. But I mean, he was the pastor there for a good while. And then he moved on to Ascension. We had a new pastor, and but he would I mean, he wouldn't necessarily do Latin because I think also too, nobody knew it.
And at
Right.
one time you had to get special permission to have a Latin mass, I believe.
Well, okay. So now, what do you mean by that, Dan? Because
Well, I thought you had to get permission from the bishop or the archbishop to do it in Latin.
no,
No? Okay.
the documents. Now, here's the thing.
That was the impression.
Here, well, maybe that was. Oh boy, here's the, I don't know what priests were saying at the time or what they were trying to.
So
Because
this was
sometimes,
a father.
well, yeah. So sometimes priests maybe use the archbishop, as a fall guy.
Oh, okay. There was a bus coming along. They threw him under it.
Maybe I'm not saying that's the case here, or at least maybe the perception was that maybe we have to get permission. I don't know. What I can say though is that the documents are very clear. Now, to your point though, if the archbishop, right, who I pledge obedience to, comes and says, you know what, I'd really want to know if you're doing the Latin Mass, right?
And by Latin Mass, you're
Meaning a Novus
Order.
Order. So we'll
Thank
get that in a second.
Thank you.
That's a good distinction, Kathy. We'll get that in a second. So right now, I can go tomorrow here at St. Anne at the 8:15 Mass and celebrate that all night. Now, people may be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? What's going on? And rightly so, maybe, right? So I think also, too, when it comes to these things, there has to be some level of preparation for it, right?
Mhm.
To mean like, let's try to learn some of this. I think that's reasonable, right? And I don't think any priest would introduce that until they. Now, I know the candlelight we had, but my impression was that was more of a different animal.
Yeah, we used to have the candlelight mass, but it was done in English. It was a
Yeah,
regular mass,
yeah.
just
It was
done in
English.
candlelight.
And that's the thing. I mean, the that really is the Orate Cheli Mass. And the problem I had, and this is just maybe just because I wasn't learning enough. My understanding is that Mass traditionally has always been celebrated in Latin.
But it was traditionally said in the morning too, right?
Correct.
Yes.
During the sunrise, yes.
Yes.
And but see, but that changed over time within the monasteries themselves, where it was formulated. So again, it's still kind of like where do we draw the line in ancient? I don't know.
Let's go
Right?
back to the first one.
Right, exactly. So yeah, I mean, there can be those what they call not necessarily innovations, but organic growth in those things, right? So there is talk about that. Now, so when it comes to Latin, yeah, there's nothing restricting anybody from using Latin in the Novus Ordo at all.
So it's basically up to you.
Correct.
Okay.
As it's up to the celebrant. Now, but again, I think there's prudent reason to say I shouldn't just like do that. Let's try to get some involvement and get some understanding before we go there, right? But even like use of incense. So incense has always been part of the Mass from time immemorial, and really there's good theological reasons behind that. Namely, it represents our prayers going up to God, right? In the sweet aroma that's being offered to God the Father. It's always used in temple worship, right? As an offering, right? Incense was the highest offering you can give to God, right? Mostly because it was very costly, but that was used in that respect, right? So also, the incense in a way kind of also alludes to the mystery that's happening in the Mass, right? So I think Bishop Barron put this actually very well. He said, when the smoke kind of gets here, it kind of obfuscates things, right? That you can't necessarily see it clearly. And that's kind of the mystery of what's happening in the Mass, that there's something happening here that we can't truly fully explain. And that's symbolized even further in the use of the incense, right? So there's many reasons behind that. But again, in the same way, the germ is very specific. Use any time, any Mass, doesn't matter, right? If we want to use it every day,
But it
great.
was kind of pushed aside and not done.
Well, and I think, and
For
here,
a variety
well,
of
so
reasons.
and here's the thing. I think a lot of that depends on the quality of your incense. So I know growing up, boy, we had like sawdust. It was not. It was cheap stuff.
Yes.
It was like, you know, when it burned, it smelled of cedar, but by the time it was done, it really smelled like stuff you throw in vomit. Right? It was not very pleasing. I will say here, I mean, it seems like we have a pretty good mix. And a lot of it depends on how you mix it. I mean, if you use cheap stuff, maybe you can mix that in with some of the higher quality things, and maybe it has a good aroma, right? Some of that could be, some of that's kind of, you know, trial and error.
And it depends on the church and how it disseminates as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
Because here, there's such a wide expanse
Correct.
that
Kind of
unless
dissipates.
you've got it building,
Right,
you're
right.
when you get toward the back, you could barely
Yep,
even tell
kind of
that it's there.
dissipates, right. Yeah. So I mean, all those things, though. Yeah. I mean, so why were they put on the back burner? I think that was just certain priests were like, well, you know, we're getting rid of this stuff. We're not doing this anymore. And
But
when
we
I was born, that's how it went.
We should be using incense during our holy days, right? During Christmas
I
and
mean,
the
well,
Christmas
well,
octave
you
and
see, that's what
Easter
well,
and the Easter octave.
that's kind of the thing, though. It's like it's not like required. So in other words, there are certain things that are what they call prescribed in the germ, right? So for
Mhm,
instance,
yeah.
one a good example of that is homilies, right? Homilies are prescribed for solemnities. You have to do them, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can't not do a homily on a Sunday or holy day of obligation or any solemnity, right? Not just holy day of obligation, but like presentation, right? That's a solemnity. Or St. Joseph, right? These days aren't necessarily holy days of obligation for us. Maybe somewhere else they are, but solemnities require a homily. Any other day, for certain days, like it says, like during Advent and Lent and feast days, it's very highly encouraged. Or there are masses where there's large gatherings, it's highly encouraged that you have a homily. Not required. Same thing when it comes to petitions, right? So you could have a very, what they call a missa simplex. So if I were celebrating Mass by myself, that looks a lot different than if I'm celebrating Mass on Sunday.
You
Right?
don't give yourself a homily.
I do not give myself a
You don't-
homily.
You don't talk to yourself.
I do not do that. That'd be kind of crazy. I think it might be committed for something like that, right? But I mean, there's different kind of what they call progressive solemnity, right? That correspond to like what type of Mass you're celebrating. So to that point, should we use incense in solemnity? Well, I mean, it's reasonable to do that because that's the highest type of Mass you can celebrate is solemnity. So, all right, sure. Now, there are also practical issues with that too, right? So, for instance, do I have servers? You know, it helps to have servers when we have some of those things, right? It's not necessary to have servers, but it does help, right?
COVID taught us you don't have to have.
Exactly, right. So a lot of those are there's always a theological reason and a practical reason behind these things, right? So for instance, talking about incense, practically speaking, it was used a lot in the Middle Ages and during the Renaissance and other times.
Cover the smell.
To cover the smell,
The smell, yeah.
right? People were traveling; the hygiene wasn't as good as
And
this
the
today.
gifts they brought.
Exactly right. And so, all right, we probably need to make this place smell a little better than it actually is. So incense, let's bring it out, right? And also with the Latin. I mean, Latin, there's a practical reason for using Latin too. That when you're talking about a universal church, if I'm here or in Singapore or in Australia or in Asia, it's going to be the same Mass because I can recognize they're greeting people. And he saw that we were in collars because we were in theology. And he said, "Oh, are you guys seminarians or priests?" I said, "Oh, we're seminarians." He's like, "Oh, well, why don't you come sit up front here? Because I'm sure the Ordinand would love to have it." And we're like, "Well, Your Excellency, we have, obligations. We have to duck out. We wanted to be stretched." "Oh, nonsense. Come on." I was like, "Oh." So brings us up right to the second row, and we're just like, well, all right. So there was a seat next to me, and I saw this older lady and this younger lady coming down the aisle, and I said, hey, well, wait, why don't you take these spots, and I'll skedaddle. So I went back in the very corner of the nave, like hiding out from everybody. And I was like, oh, there's no way anyone's going to find me. The bishop, no, he's none the wiser. It'll be fine. Well, little I know that in the procession, they would come out the aisle where I was. And my friend did the same thing. He's like, hey, so we're sitting there together, and then we start the procession, and the bishop sees us, and he was like, he had like a scowl on his face. Well, okay, that being said, the mass itself was about almost 4 hours long for one or none. The bishop preached for about 35 minutes, maybe 40. The rites usually take a long time, so that either.
How many
But-
were there?
Just
one.
one. That's what I'm amazed at.
One.
I've been at ordinations here in St. Louis. Yeah. And it used
Uh, yes. So and at that one, the sign of peace. So they started the Lamb of God,
Mhm.
and this bishop went to each individual deacon and priest, and everyone was in the sanctuary. And it was just sign of peace. It was it was, oh, how's your mom? How's the parish doing? It was like
Social hour.
okay, cool. So yeah, that took a while.
Okay. Okay.
So, but he's the ordinary, and if that's her tradition, okay. Now, personally, if I were the ordinary, I'd be like, that seems a little excessive, but okay, whatever. I'm not the ordinary, so it's his call. So yeah, I mean, there are always these kind of interpretations, and that's why the local ordinary is the local ordinary. The bishop is the one to make those determinations.
Now, I don't know if this is tradition, but or just country thing, but we had a visiting priest here not too long ago,
Mhm.
and prior to giving out communion, he said, "Do you remember what he said?" Like,
No, he didn't say it prior to
When-
communion. It was after communion was over.
Okay.
no, I thought he said, no. Oh, that in his country, wherever he's from,
Yeah.
I think most people receive it on the tongue,
Uh-huh.
right? And if he knows that in the United States you can do
Right.
it in your hands,
Right.
so he's okay with that. But what do you say? You have to have you have to
Make the throne.
or something.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
Well, you have to have both hands available. 'Cause
Yeah, right.
So during communion, several people came up either with canes or walkers or whatever, and they just grabbed it with one hand.
Sure.
And
Sure.
so he, being from another country where they are not allowed to receive
Right.
it in the hand,
Right.
kind of did a little mini lecture. And he was very kind about it.
So this was after communion was
It
kind
was
of just
after,
saying,
it
I
was
see.
before the end
Okay.
of Mass.
Okay.
Everybody had already received.
Sure.
But he said, you should really, if you're going to receive it in the hand,
Right.
have a throne for Jesus
Yeah.
with both hands.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
anything could fall.
So
and
so
that
again,
was his
it's
point.
yeah,
It was-
it's a question of propriety,
well,
right?
because
So
they
if-
aren't allowed to.
right,
I
exactly,
think the United
right,
States
yeah.
is the only one that receives it in the hand.
and that's the thing. I mean, well, maybe
Right.
also in other places like English-speaking places. I think in Australia and Canada, I think you are too.
Oh.
Maybe I think it's more English-speaking places. But yeah, I mean, so
Predominantly,
yeah, and so I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, so
No, he's not.
we should be respectful of who we're receiving in these moments, right? And so there are, and you're right, and there can be ways when if you pinch with a claw, that could there possibly particles or crumbs are falling on the floor in that? Yeah, right. Now most people probably won't really think much about that, or really, or there has been some people who call that crumb theology, but I look at it this way: if Thomas Aquinas says, "Hey, every particle of the Eucharist in the Church confirms that," then we have to claim that. We have to support that.
I think his point at the end of Mass was just like letting everyone know
Sure.
where he's from.
Sure.
And then he was cautioning, and he said, if you come to me for communion and you
Mhm.
don't have both hands available, I will give it to you on the top.
Yeah. So he's still not denying it. He's saying, "I'm going to give it to you," but
Right.
right. Which I mean, sure.
Which I think he did.
Sure.
And it kind of threw people off.
Yeah, maybe it does.
But instruction goes back to the 2nd century
Mhm.
of making a throne
Mhm.
and receiving.
Mhm.
the precious body in your
Correct.
hand.
Right, and I think
Yeah.
to that point, I mean, could there be exceptions where you have, let's say, someone who's on a cane, they're trying to hold their weight, maybe
Then
not
they
maybe not
should
the
receive-
pincher.
Then his point
Yeah.
was you should receive
Right.
it on the tongue.
Well, I mean,
If you are unable to make a
Right.
throne for Jesus, you should receive it on the tongue.
So
That was his
I
point.
will say that personally, when I would always receive in the hand until I got to the seminary.
I mean, that's what we.
Yeah,
grew up with.
and when I the reason I switched to taking communion on the tongue is because, well, even after I receive in my hand, there could still be particles on my fingers, on my palm, and what I started doing until I started just receiving on the tongue was licking,
Mhm.
which also isn't sanitary.
Right, right.
So
Right.
so then I realized, like, probably best just take it on the tongue, because
Yeah.
there is also a level of receptivity
Right.
and humility in that too.
Right. Exactly.
So again, the USCCB, the bishops in the United States, give that option, and so therefore it's valid, right? So good. But yeah, I think we as faithful need to kind of understand our responsibility too, and also kind of discern these things and say, well,
Yeah.
maybe it's better to do it this other way.
So
Yeah.
we have a good priest friend of my mom's that he's from Nigeria, I think,
Mhm.
originally, and
Mhm.
but in his parish, he's now in Columbia, Missouri. He
Mhm.
was at Jeff City, but what he does is he lets everyone know that if you want to receive it from the tongue, you need to be in his
Sure.
aisle.
Sure.
So he gives
Yeah.
it so the Eucharistic ministers don't have to. So I mean, I like that because
Yeah, there certainly are strategies and ways you can do that to make sure that our Lord is respected.
yeah, and I think some parishes are even bringing back like a kneeler if you want a
Yep.
kneeler.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we're using a kneeler at Newman Center now.
Nice,
There are a lot of students there that want to use the kneeler.
nice.
So
Nice.
good.
I think St. Peter's in St. Charles has a kneeler if you want.
Oh, could
And
be.
it's on
Yeah.
Mother Phoebe's side.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I know the cathedral went to doing the communion rail, so they're still doing that with
Nice.
Monsignor
We don't
Breyer.
have one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Presentation does.
That's true. They do. That's true. Yeah. So I mean, these things that we look at. That's why I mean the local ordinary has a lot of authority when it comes to that, and that could be something like it'd be a vicar general. In our case, it could be a episcopal vicar.
So I think
Right.
when we went to the Carmelites that time for Corpus Christi, they still did the.
Intinction.
Mhm.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, that's also valid. I mean, the only thing is with intinction is have to be done by clergy.
Yeah, it was priest.
Yeah.
I mean, because it was the Carmelites.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yep.
So,
Yep. So as long as the clergy does it, you're good.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was an event for St. Agnes. It was just the.
So I know you've only been here in this parish a few months.
4 months.
Who's counting?
Right.
So do you kind of have like a vision for the future of what you would like to see?
No, that's good, Kathy. Right now I'm still kind of a lot of things I'm still kind of observing.
Okay.
I mean, because like
Trying to figure out.
yeah. I mean, I look at it this way. I've been here for an Advent and a Christmas. Good. There's a lot of information that was taken in there. I've had several school masses. A lot of information being taken in with these. But I haven't really even seen a full year.
Okay. I was
Yeah.
just sometimes.
Yeah, no, I think I'm formulating, but like, I don't have anything finalized, because I'm still trying to like, okay, well, like Lent and Easter are going to probably play a big part in sort of maybe how that works.
So I saw the February calendar that came
Mhm,
out.
mhm.
It doesn't mention stations at all.
Yeah, no, that's actually going to be in my article this weekend. We're going to do stations. Apparently, the tradition here has been 2:30 on Fridays to have
And
the students.
presentation was on Wednesday.
Yeah, I know. I mean, again, I think part of that's because the school children can be involved with that, so they do it for the benefit of the kids,
Okay.
right? So the kids will come over 2:30 stations, and then they would be dismissed, I think, after that. That was my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, I mean, my thought is, well, that works here. Let's just do it here like that. I mean, that doesn't mean you can't change in the future. It's just trying to kind of determine, like, okay, well, let's see how this goes, right? And the fact we're having a deacon now, I mean, a lot of that could depend on his schedule in the future too. So if it's more conducive, maybe he could do Wednesday night as it by the language being spoken. And it also differentiates between, let's say, our rite, R-I-T-E, and other rites, right? So if I go into a church and they're speaking Greek, okay, that's not Latin. No, maybe it's Catholic. I don't know. hopefully, right? Especially after 10:54, maybe, hopefully, right? But I can at least say, okay, at least I know what's going on here, right? So again, there's always a practical and a theological reason.
It is helpful when Latin is used for the people to know what is said,
Sure, sure.
and that's kind of
Yeah, and part of that too, I think, is based on getting it ready for Advent.
who wants
that's
to
not-
look?
that's-
I don't
It's
know.
not mine.
It's not mine either. I know that
No,
much.
it could be mine.
Unless I don't think it is. No.
Sounds like it's back.
Well, that's my car. It just beeped.
Stop.
Okay, good. All right.
Not mine?
Okay.
Stop, somebody's out there.
Okay, good. All right. We'll go again. Sorry, we had a little horn honking outside. We're not really sure what that. Oh, there we go again. All right. I don't know what
There's a car out
that.
there. Lights on.
So, I'm sorry, I got lost on the question.
To have what the Latin means.
Yeah. So yeah, part of that was kind of a thing. Like I know coming in here, I've been told that it was traditional here, especially during Advent and Lent, like Agnus Dei and the Sanctus usually is done here. It's Saint Anne, right? So again, part of this maybe is a learning curve as far as okay, what's been done at the two parishes, what can work, what can bend well. So we're still trying to kind of discern that and figure that out. And right now, when it comes to those things, I'm kind of more of a observe mode to see what kind of works as far as bringing the two communities together, right? And we're open to discussion and any input as far as that's concerned. But yeah, I mean, one thing that I did in my former parish, because we would have a Latin Novus Ordo about once a month. But before we did that, we took about 6 months and actually did a weekly Latin course that was just on the actual liturgy, meaning we would do practice the Mass parts. And I think what people that went to that realized was that there's not a lot that the laity say in Latin, and if they do, it's actually kind of repetitive. So like if I were to say Dominus Vobiscum,
Ecum Spiritu Tuo.
right? I mean, most people kind of can get that pretty easily, right? Or amen. Now there are certain things that may be more essential, like Ecce Agnus Dei, Ecce qui tollit peccata mundi, benedicta vos vocate sunt, right? So blessed, that, and that's just behold the Lamb of God, behold him takes away the sins of the world. Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb, right? Now in Latin, it would be a little different, right? Then which would be it's so funny because now I'm from the other side. I don't want to say as much. It's always funny how when you think about the Mass, you can always do it in the context of the Mass, but you can't do it outside the context of the Mass, right?
Yes.
So it's Lord, I'm not worthy to enter my roof. I only said word. Yeah. So Dominus non dignatus subtectum meum et sanabitur manum mea. So that's the Latin, but unless you knew that and practice it over and over again, you would never get it.
Well, Father, that's what I was gonna bring up, is that, our age group here, in general, we can respond almost automatically to some of those things.
Right.
But the younger generation, they don't.
Yeah.
And they're looking like, what are you talking
Yeah, right.
about?
Right.
And I say the same thing to churches that I go to that have Spanish masses.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you got to have the translation there so people
Yes.
can appreciate
Yeah.
and go along with
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't learn anything by standing there saying,
Right.
what are they talking
Right.
about?
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just throw that out. I say,
Yeah,
it's
good.
good to have
Yeah.
the mix, but
Yeah.
if we're going to pass it on,
Right.
Have
Right.
that.
they've got to know what they're
Yeah.
hearing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, the hand misses we actually had for that Mass, we did have the English translation there too. But yeah, but I think it'd be, to do that again, we probably want to get something developed as far as
Well,
like.
even on Sunday. The
Well, I mean, that's
communion-
what, I don't know. See, that's what, I don't
He calls
know.
it the communion chant. I think he calls it after our song. It's in Latin.
Well, okay, now here's the thing. Sometimes those things, when it comes and we talked about this a little bit when we had our discussion on liturgical music. We didn't really maybe go in depth on this, but we did talk about there are certain things that are intended for just like the cantor or the choir to sing and nobody else, right? and sometimes those antiphons are those things, right?
But when they're in another language and you don't know what's being said.
Yeah. So I guess to that point, I mean, in some ways, there's a level of mystery involved with that we can kind of contemplate, right?
Every week.
Maybe. I don't. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't know. So, but we did kind of touch on those things a little bit. I didn't recognize that I don't know. Maybe I wasn't really paying attention. I got other things going on.
Well, you do, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. But I didn't ever notice it.
That might be something that needs to be explained to the general congregation.
Yeah, you're mixing a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because from Holy, like what you were saying, Mel, we came from Holy Trinity, and our holy masses on high holy days, if you'd like to use that term, were in English, Spanish, and French.
Oh.
But we had,
like all at the same time?
No.
well, like one reading would be in English and the response in something else, and then the next reading.
That's actually kind of interesting too.
Well, we had a
difficult.
huge
Yeah.
African community,
Sure.
and we did some Swahili.
Well, I just say that because the German is actually very explicit when it comes to mixing languages, and it's actually explicitly forbidding it.
Okay.
Except for Latin.
Well, Latin's always a mother tongue.
Well, but if you do English and Latin, is that not mixing?
It is.
Okay.
And technically should not be done?
Technically, no. Now here's the other thing though too.
The
question.
according to the germ?
According to the germ. Now here's the thing. The question can be, and here's where it comes down when it comes to liturgical maxims. The thought was that whatever was ambiguous in the Novus Ordo, right? So this could be one of those ambiguities. Okay, we're allowed to use the vernacular, but Latin is the mother tongue. So we're trying to, if the intent here is we're trying to help people understand, well, it's not necessarily explicit in the Novus Ordo that you can actually mix the vernacular with Latin. But it does say you can't have multiple languages.
So having a bilingual Spanish and
See,
English mass,
but see, I think
you
that's
shouldn't do that.
I think that's where you can say the ambiguity lies. So what it would say, what the maximum would be, which isn't explicit in the German, but I think most liturgists would say if it's not explicit or at least ambiguous, you refer back to the extraordinary form. And so in the extraordinary form, there were allowances to have the readings, let's say, in vernacular, and the rest of the Mass in Latin. Right.
It used to be done twice in Latin.
Right, and that also
in
too
English.
was something was in the germ for the extraordinary form. And some priests, when you see some extraordinary form masses, if they have a homily, they will do it in both Latin and English. So yeah, so to that point, could there be ambiguity there? Well, maybe there is a little ambiguity there.
Yeah, but the times have changed too, because back then you didn't usually have that many people with different languages all in the same community.
Right. Typically, and that's the thing also too. Like typically, that could have been more development over time. It was more organic, but it was explicit. It was actually allowed within the general structure for the extraordinary form. Now, since summer of 2021, there's even kind of more what we call lacunas or gaps when it comes to those things, right? Because for instance, well, now can you go refer back to the extraordinary form now that's been sort of, I don't like the word suppressed, but limited, maybe. Let's put it limited. That might be a better word. There's some questions about that because there's a lot of things that came out of the document, the bull, the motu proprio from 2021, when it talks about limitations to the extraordinary form. For instance, I have faculties to celebrate the extraordinary form because I was ordained prior to 2021. But I need the space to celebrate.
And the reason Wednesday night was picked because Friday everybody was at the fish fry and nobody.
Sure. Yeah.
The people
Well,
who were there were working.
And that makes sense. I mean, I can just tell you, like personally though, every Wednesday I have is booked because with Newman Center and with the events that are going on in the parish in the evening, I wouldn't be able to do it anyway. So again, I'm not opposed. If the deacon is available, we can talk to him. But yeah, it's part of that's just trying to determine what have we done before and seeing how that works first.
So when you say what have we done before, you're just looking at the,
I'm looking at everything.
Everything.
Yeah, I mean, so again, like if there are options between if there's difference between what Wake Pres has done thing and St. Anne's done thing, it kind of depends on my schedule too, and then also like how that would work in with the whole community, and then also like where, right?
Mhm.
So again, yeah, we're kind of discerning that as we go forward.
So I guess if you had a Wednesday evening at Pres, then the presentation people and people that live around there would be more likely to go to that. If you had a Wednesday evening.
Right.
here,
I mean, so and that's what I'm saying. Maybe the solution would be, let's just do it on Thursday. So I mean, and then the question was, where should we do it? Should we alternate back and forth? I mean, this actually was kind of the same line I think we were doing with the fish fry, because at one point we were kind of discussing, should we have two different fish fries, or should we just go back and forth between the two churches, or should we do it one
That's
place
too
and
much
one
work.
place? So, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, so it was trying to like, what would be the best way to engage everyone as a community to come together and have an event, right? And I think our decision makes sense to have it here at St. Anne with the mixed, volunteers, and incorporate a lot of what Presentation did in their fish fries into what's going on here. So I think at the fish fry meeting, I'll say there was a lot of good interaction and information flowing. And I think that from that, there's formulated this plan going forward, which I think is going to benefit all of us. And it's good to see, because I think we need more of that, right? Yeah. So good. You know,
It takes a lot of volunteers to run too.
it's
You have
right.
to have somebody
Right.
who
Well,
spearheads it.
and also, I mean, just practically speaking, apparently there were a lot of participants that weren't coming back this year, especially those that kind of led things at Presentation. And so it was like, well,
Yeah, if you don't have a leader to order the fish and make sure everything's done, you
Yep.
can't do two
Yeah, right,
locations.
right.
It's just impossible.
but we're gonna actually use some of the stuff over at I mean, so I think one of the plans is we're gonna store the fish over there in the freezer, because they have a great huge freezer. So wonderful,
Big
right?
walk.
Yeah. So maybe you do a lot of the prep over there. So we're definitely going to be present at both places, and so good. Yeah. I think one of the things that would be interesting to see is like, my impression is that at Presentation, the fish fry was a fundraiser. Like, this is like, hey, we're trying to make money here and build up our our stores and everything. At St. Anne, it appears it was more of a social event. So, which is good too. I mean, there's a lot of good there. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes together, and how that goes forward. So we'll see. I mean, that's interesting to observe and see. Yeah. And we'll see how this year's go. And maybe, I mean, I've also been thrown out there, maybe we can go to Presentation next year and just do everything over there next year, just see how that works, and then kind of compare and see what would be the best thing to do. So I'm open to different things, but right now,
one
yeah,
crew, but
right.
1 year's here,
Right.
next year it's there.
I mean, just because I want to part of this is just trying to figure out, well, what have we done, and what have both places done, and what would be the best thing to do now, right? In some cases that's just, well, let's just do what we did here last year or over there last year. Okay, well, yeah. So I know I'm going to make mistakes too. So I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I totally understand that. So I'm open to correction and direction too. So it was really great. Yeah.
Correction.
Yeah, that's right.
I have another question.
Great.
Jumping back to communion.
Yeah.
I know, at least I think I know there's no like definitive answer on this, just wondering what you were taught, but the point of the liturgy of the Eucharist, where the bread and wine get changed into the body and blood, some say when, you call down the Holy Spirit upon it, and the other say, when you say, this is my body, this is my blood.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so the definitive teaching of the church is that the actual transubstantiation happens when the priest says, holding the bread, this is my body, and then this is my blood. So as long as those 8 words are said by the priest, or a priest, I should say, that is celebrating the Mass, it becomes the body and blood of Jesus, right? And that's important because the word, the matter, and the form of the sacrament, and the form of the sacrament is, this is my body, this is my blood, right? It was funny. I had a teacher at one of my assignments, former assignments, who came to me and said, okay, what needs to be done for it to be a mass? And it was a good question because I was like, well, to be a mass, there has to be a reading. Has to be a reading, right? Maybe not the reading for the day, but as long as a reading is done, okay. And the words, this is my body and this is my blood, needs to be said using the valid matter by a priest. As long as that happens, it's a mass. Now, if anything is different other than, so if anything is, so like for instance, if you're using the wrong reading, right? It's illicit, even highly illicit, especially if the priest knows better. Or if, let's say, the priest changes the words around to like the Eucharistic prayer, or omits something, or doesn't, whatever. As long as he says, this is my body, this is my blood, it's a mass.
Valid.
It's a valid
Illicit,
mass.
but not.
Highly
not
illicit,
invalid.
but it is a valid mass, right? It'd be matter, and the point, it would maybe be the point, it'd be matter for the confessional for that priest. Should be the matter for
If you
confession
did
of that
it
priest.
knowingly.
Okay, but here's the
Change
thing.
the words.
Here's the
You're
thing.
knowingly doing
Well,
it.
that's the thing. Is what you're right. And we would objectively say the priest should know better.
Unless dementia's involved.
That can be
happen.
circumstance.
That can
That
happen.
can be I think in this
And
circumstances,
then you wouldn't know
in-
about it
in-
if you were going through that. and
in the
hadn't-
circumstance that was brought to me, because the concern was with this particular teacher was there's a lot being done up there that is not within the rubric. So if I'm there as a layman,
Mhm.
what has to be done so that I can actually say I went to mass that day? Good question. I said that's what needs to be said. Okay, good. He does that. Good. Okay. But in this particular circumstance, it was like, no, he really should have known better. And you can say, well, in the seminary, well, yeah, okay, but maybe, I don't know, maybe there could be some misinterpretation that was taught or misunderstanding, I don't know, or maybe something was received not in the way it should be. That's all true, right? But what's interesting about this particular circumstance was that when other priests are around,
Then it doesn't
celebrating,
happen.
yes,
Interesting.
it's interesting that doesn't happen.
Very interesting.
Oh.
So there's an acknowledgement of,
The reason I said you have to willingly know, because there have been transposition of some words in some Eucharistic prayers at masses I've been at.
Yeah, I mean, so like,
So,
yeah,
and it wasn't done on.
sure.
on
Yeah,
purpose.
no.
It
Yeah,
was
I mean, so like,
just-
I've been in places and where like the priest after the Eucharistic prayer would come over, was like, did I say that? Like, yeah, you're good. Okay, all right, good. And yeah.
you
yeah.
can get into
No,
it.
sure.
Oh,
I mean,
state.
I mean, I have to. I admit I've gotten to that rhythm where you're just like you're focusing. I mean, it's good because you're focusing on what's being said. You're focusing on what's happening. But in the midst of that, you could kind of lose the forest for the trees and say, "Wait a minute, did I say that word?" Okay, so yeah, I mean, being attentive is one thing, but also too when it's your maybe fourth mass of the day, and you're just like, things can happen. You're right. That's true. It could be unintentional. That's very true.
I've been in masses where the lector read the wrong readings
Yeah,
for the day.
and see, in those circumstances, I mean, you do the best you can. The extraordinary form. So what the document that came out was very, or at least I should say the dubia. The response to the dubia was very clear. It says you can't mix spaces, which made St. Luke kind of an interesting scenario because they were doing that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But after all things new, they're now just the oratory. They're no longer St. Luke, right? They used to split. They used to do extraordinary form. That's it, because the document was clear. You can't have both forms of the mass in the same sanctuary. Why? No, right? But like,
Because of the orientation of the altar?
well, but see, that's not really been a problem with the extraordinary form anyway. So maybe there was kind of this understanding of the architecture. I guess I don't know. That's still kind of a moot point, from the CDF or not the CD, like Astrid. So yeah, I mean it's kind of there's kind of like a lot of questions open when it comes to these things now, because like, well, now what do we refer to? Like, so where we see that explicitly, I think, is more like use of the bells, right? So there's nothing in the term of the Novus Ordo that says you should ring the bells during the epiclesis or the consecration.
It doesn't say how many times either.
Nope.
It says small bells may be used.
Maybe used.
Maybe
Right?
used.
Maybe used. Right? Yeah, that's always the wording. Maybe.
Maybe
Right?
used.
So in that ambiguity, you would say, okay, well, what have we done in extraordinary form? Oh, well, they did it this time. Oh, okay, great, cool. We'll just do that, right? So it's kind of an interesting time to be a liturgist these days. I feel bad for Father Nick Smith, who's a good friend of mine, because he's kind of dealing with a lot of these things now and kind of fielding these questions, and in some ways being the bad guy because he has to make some of these calls, right, on behalf of the Archbishop when it comes to these things. But I will say, I think the Archbishop did a very prudent and wise thing when it came to this kind of confusion. He basically made, because the document did kind of leave it up to the bishops to decide prudently how that would happen in their diocese. He basically said, wherever it's happening now, let's keep it. Wherever it's not happening, let's not go forward, right? I think that's pretty reasonable. And so I think that's pretty amicable as far as that's concerned, and prudent on his part. You know. But all this to say is that, you know, a lot of these things were allowances that were happening that came out of Vatican II. And you know, then there's this kind of question of progressive solemnity, right? So would it be appropriate to, like, you know, do these things? Well, would I do it at a daily mass? And even the liturgy kind of has these things already ingrained into it, that you kind of know what kind of mass it is based on what's being done in the mass. So, like, for instance, when it comes to a feast, well, you know you're going to hear the Gloria, right, on a feast day. And if it's a solemnity, you know you're going to probably hear another reading as well as the Creed, right? So in that respect, the Novus Ordo already has that progressive solemnity included into it. Whereas the extraordinary form wasn't as clear about that. Now, you still had different kind of hierarchies there too. So you had kind of, you know, you had the low mass, high mass, and like a missa cantata. But where that kind of was interesting is that, let's say you could have a low mass on Easter Sunday, right?
Yes.
So it's like, hey, it's Easter Sunday. Yeah, let's do a low mass.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
The 5 a.m. mass on
right,
Easter Sunday.
yeah, exactly. So in the Novus Ordo, I think it's more explicit. It's like, no, this is a big day. We need to kind of, you know, elevate that. Whereas in the extraordinary form, well, yeah, there's still kind of this level of like, well, you know, we're celebrating mass. That's all that really matters. Yeah, sure, right. So yeah, it's kind of, there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, a lot of good, a lot of interesting things happening in both forms. And I even understand kind of in some ways the logic of the Holy Father. I think in some ways it was maybe, I don't know if it was completely accurate, the reasoning behind the release, the promulgation of the document from 2021. Because what his rationale was, in history, there's never been two forms of the Latin Rite. And that's somewhat true. And I say somewhat because before, like, you know, the 8th century, there were different things happening because, well, we're over here in Germany and we're over here in Italy, and so we're doing different things. It's all the same structure. It's all the same structure, but like maybe one place the sign of peace here, and the sign of peace will be done over here in a different time, right? Or maybe the offertory be happening at a different time. What really started to bring that together was the expansion of the missionaries into these other pagan lands. So maybe Germany wasn't a good example, but like France, let's say, right? So France, these places where Christianity was still like, the cradle of Christianity, there were different things going on in different places. And so finally, when let's say you start having these itinerant orders that were going out and evangelizing and talking to these pagan cultures, the question is, well, what do you do for Mass? Well, what they did was they went to the Pope. What does the Pope do? He's the Holy Father. Whatever he does, we should be doing too, right? And at that point, it started to solidify. And once they started doing it, what the Pope did, everyone else started to follow suit. But that didn't happen until like the 7th, 8th century. And so from then on, yeah, you could say there was sort of a standardized rite, that maybe there is sort of a novelty in the 20th, from the 16th century on, or really, I should say from the 20th century on, where you had these two forms that were valid being used in the Latin Rite, where every other rite only had one way they were doing things, which is kind of true. But I think primarily what the Holy Father was focusing on was this, whether explicit or implicit belief by those who attend the extraordinary form, that the extraordinary form is the only valid form of the Mass. Now, maybe in some places of the world that is a thought. I in my experience here in St. Louis, I don't think many people that attend the extraordinary form believe that, or if they did believe, they weren't explicit about it. But apparently, a lot of this came from internet, people, and you can always trust what you read on the internet, right? So, which is why I think kind of brought the Holy Father to kind of look at this and say, well, maybe we need to limit this. Because I think in the same way, a very reverently celebrated Novus Ordo has the same effect in some ways of the extraordinary form, if not more so. I just think there's kind of different approaches in both those forms, right? Both good, both valid, right? Which is why I think it was always kind of wise, especially from Benedict XVI, to have kind of this like preference, whatever you feel comfortable with, do. If you feel at home in the extraordinary form, great. If you're at home in the Novus Ordo, great, right? I think the frustrating thing that I know a lot of my brother priests, and I think a lot of other faithfuls was that even though a lot of maybe the abuses were addressed in the document on the extraordinary form, not a lot was addressed on the abuses of the Novus Ordo. And unfortunately, I don't think we have to look very far, even within our own diocese, I'm sorry to say, to see some of that abuse. Where you have priests, whether they should know better or not, that's up to between them and God. I'm not going to judge anyone as far as that's concerned. But you have priests in our archdiocese who don't say the black and do the red, which is the most fundamental thing a priest really needs to do, right? I mean, that's all you have to do.
I'm going to omit this.
Yes, yeah, right, yeah. Or change it. I mean, it's like, well,
yes.
Okay, I mean, again, as a matter of fact, I had a in my former parish, a teacher asked me. They weren't parishioners at our parish, but they went to another parish, and the teacher asked me, Father, okay, what needs to be said for it to be valid? And I was like, well, a reading has to be read, meaning something from Scripture, whether, preferably gospel, but some reading, and the words, this is my body and this is my blood, as long as it's a valid matter. Right? So as long as a validly ordained priest says, this is my body, this is my blood, with valid matter, it's a Mass. Everything else lead up to that, well, hey, they can make it up, I guess, as they go along. But that's all that basically essentially needs to be done.
That can change the bread from the host, the typical host that we use, which some.
I mean, yeah, because what? Oh, hey, whoa, wait, oh,
Yeah.
Because then you're embarrassing the person,
Right.
Yeah. It's
Better
I think
letting-
once
there
a
are-
priest walked over, didn't even put her on the right page.
Maybe.
yeah. I mean, there could be pastoral necessity in saying. I mean, because a lot of it depends on the. I mean, so, like for instance,
think that
Especially if his homily was bad.
Yeah.
No, I think
Well, yes.
I think the one he's thinking of is she was reading the gospel.
Oh, yeah,
That
okay,
was-
all right, yeah.
yeah,
So
so he
now you
came
get like,
up-
yeah,
So
yeah,
that was
yeah,
it was
right,
just a probably
Yeah, I
pages
mean,
stuck together or whatever.
in some sort of like for like a daily Mass, it's sort of like, well, especially if it's like there can be some exceptions made.
Yeah.
I
but
mean,
it
in
was probably
general,
just a sticking
you want to
point.
maintain the cycle, the continuous reading. But like for instance, tomorrow, it's the Memorial of St. John Bosco, and so part of the discussion we had with the Miss Flenti was, well, the reading for the day is rather long and hard.
Samuel.
Yeah, Samuel's long. You got some long
Samuel's
passages in there, right?
Poor Dave.
Oh yeah, a lot about David. It's all good. It was also like, yeah. So we have the kids are reading. It's like, well, okay, well we have John Bosco. Let's look at his readings. Oh, his readings are easier. Let's use John Bosco.
Right.
Great, good. That's allowed. It's in the rubric. Cool. Still be illicit, whatever. When it becomes illicit is, let's say, and I've had this struggle before too. I was at a former parish. Well, you can narrow it down, I guess. There was a teacher, and I felt really bad for this teacher because the teacher was there. The class that this person was leading had the mass the following week, and unbeknownst to me, the teacher was given some direction that was inappropriate. I'm not saying it was willed or anything. It was not the right thing. But the students already, were learning it, practicing it, already kind of had it already. And this happened I found out this on a Friday. The mass that they were going to do was on a Tuesday. So Monday is my day off typically at this place. And so, but I wanted to make sure this was clear because it was still kind of misunderstood. And I went to the teacher and I said, well, is there a way maybe we can have these students just read, maybe just break out the petitions more and have them read that, and I'll just read the reading or whatever. Well, they've already practiced it. Sorry. And I said this, and I probably maybe shouldn't have said it to her, but I said, well, what you're asking me to do is to celebrate an illicit mass. Well, I mean, I was like, well, it's not like a big issue, but I mean, it's one of these things where I know it's wrong. Now, under the circumstances, I'm not going to tell you to go back and tell the kids to do something else because I've already done it. It's tomorrow. It's already through the morning. Okay, I get it. So yeah, fine. Right. But I mean, sometimes pastoral reason can negate in those ways. And it wasn't like it was like a Sunday mass. It wasn't like it was like, a holy day or like anything like that, or like, a solemnity or a feast. It was, as I recall, I think it was maybe a ferial day, and it was just one of these things where it's like, well, yeah. And I think part of the struggle there is always like when you're having kids minister, right? Well, but also too, like, what is appropriate for them? I'll say this on camera because I think whatever, but there are the children's liturgy, for instance, can be an option. I don't like it. I don't like the children's lectionary.
Options?
Well, no, I don't like the children's lectionary.
Oh, not the Eucharistic.
Yeah.
Not Eucharistic prayer. Do you do that?
Wait,
No.
what? What are you talking about?
Children's Eucharistic prayer.
Well, that's not in the missal, as far as I know.
It's there. I'll have to find it. There's an addition, an addendum.
Well, okay.
Mhm.
So, by whom? So when I say that, like when it comes to the children's lectionary, I don't like doing it. And if it came down between using the children's lectionary and having maybe not that grade level read, not that grade level read, right? Because I think there's two things. There's two thoughts on that. First off, not that it would be invalid or illicit. It would still be valid and illicit. I'm not saying it's not. Well, depending on the circumstances. But, that's good. That gets kind of the weeds pretty quick. But when it comes to these things, especially when like the daily masses and the continuous readings and capability, maybe that's an indication that these children shouldn't be ministering in that way.
See, I think that the children's book or the lectionary is okay. Like back in the day, it used to be kindergarten, first and second came to mass, and that's all.
Right.
It wasn't an all school.
Right.
You went on Tuesday and
Right.
Thursday, and and
Right.
then the upper kids went and read
Right.
from the big book. So I'm coming from like, yeah, if you're only going to have kindergarten, first, and second there, then it's
I'll give you that.
perfectly
I'll give you
fine.
that. And I think in
know.
these circumstances, usually the way they had broken up was like K through 4.
Mhm.
But the thought is like,
But
if you have
even
the fourth
4
graders
now,
there, why don't you just
right.
have them? I mean, because like
Right.
the other thing too, I think the other thing this kind of does is diminish the, I don't want to say glamour, but the desire to maybe minister in those ways. Because I look at it this way: if I'm an 8th grader and our time comes up to actually minister at the mass, I don't know if I'd be as, enthused because, well, if a kindergarten is doing it, why? What's the difference?
Right.
I
So
don't
it
know.
really should be just for
Right,
that age.
right.
group.
If a baby's doing it, well, then it seems like that's kind of immature, right? I think there's some thoughts about that. I think there's kind of some arguments, both for and against. And not that children shouldn't be a part of liturgy. I think that they're obviously part of liturgy, but should we be training them in a way that's more conducive to what the liturgy is directed to? And I think for so long we've gotten this mindset of activism and not active participation, and especially in the school settings.
Yeah.
That there's been this sort of like approach where everyone needs a ministry. Well, yes, everyone has a ministry, but not everyone has the same ministry. So the ministry may be, I'm offering my spiritual sacrifice as a common priest. Let's focus on that. Because if we're not focusing on that, then it doesn't really matter these other ministries, right? So I don't know. I think there's ways we can look at that and do things that are conducive and make things enthusiastic.
Mhm.
And there is a frame of thought that those participating should be baptized.
Oh, anyone that ministers in those ministries should be.
Mhm.
Yes. And there's a distinction there too, because like even when it comes to like servers, like there's been brought up, well, can baptized children serve? Of course they can. Should they receive the Eucharist? Well, that's a different question. I think if we're moving towards that, we need to be clear.
Only if they're Catholic.
Only if they. Well, here's the thing: only if they actually believe what the church professes and are in a state of grace. And that's another story, because, like, well, if you're a Lutheran, could you be in that state? Yeah, you could. But also, to your point, though, the Eucharist is also not just, it is in addition to the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, which is amazing, it's also a symbol of unity, right? And if we're in a denomination that's not unified with the Catholic Church, well, you should refrain out of respect, right? Now, that can be very, not necessarily difficult, but can be, making those distinctions be difficult for someone of that age can understand. Because you could say, well, I'm going to a Catholic school. Yeah. Where do you go on Sunday? So, yeah, it's kind of a difficult
It's hairy.
thing. It is very hairy. It is very hairy. And to flesh all that out for someone at like the age of a 10 to 14-year-old, can they actually understand that? I don't know.
I think they can understand if they're not Catholic, that's something reserved for Catholics.
Yeah.
And then there's that desire to become Catholic.
Well, that's the thing. Like, if you believe what this truly is and you're in a state of grace, then what's stopping you from doing that anyway?
Yeah.
I mean, at least inherently, you are Catholic. But there has to be, you're right, it has to be an expression of that, which we call the expression of faith, and that's where we would bring people into the church through that expression. Right? So, yeah.
Some years ago, we were up in the Northeast visiting friends, and they tended to use regular bread. It started out as regular bread.
Unleavened.
You mean leavened bread, like Wonder Bread or something?
No, it
or-
wasn't
Unleavened.
Wonder Bread. It was
Unleavened.
unleavened bread, but it was, sometimes it had cinnamon in it, sometimes it didn't. But it was a regular Catholic
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
This goes back probably 30 years.
Yeah.
So things were a little, even though it was the Northeast part of the country, it's kind of the Wild West.
Sure. Yeah. Boy. Well, I mean,
And I'm
Valid,
sure
not
that was a
illicit.
parish
Yeah.
thing.
so
So
I would say this, Dan, as long as it was unleavened bread, unleavened wheat bread at the root, right? So whether it had sugar sprinkled on it or cinnamon sprinkled on it or not, okay, as long as it was unleavened wheat bread and it was pure grape wine. So
I
it's,
don't know about the wine.
Okay, all right.
I don't know about that.
so, and that's actually a good factor too, because the wine and the body and the blood need to be consecrated validly. So let's say the body's consecrated validly and the blood is not. It's not a valid mass, right? Now,
In the person's eyes that doesn't think it's valid.
what do you mean by that? No,
If I'm a parishioner and I don't know the difference,
that's the difference. So if you were to receive in that case, in that sense, right, not knowing this, you would still you're still fine. You're fine. You're okay. The sin is not on you; it's on that priest, right? And so, because the priest should know better, and I think that's kind of what was kind of disappointing with this document that came out was that was never really addressed, right? And so that's unfortunate, because if the Novus Ordo is the one that's being, and now the Novus Ordo is being celebrated much more in the extraordinary form, why wouldn't you? Just to bring that unity, if anything else, right? And I say all this in the utmost respect, because I love Francis. I think sometimes he gets a bad rap as far as, like, you know, what he says, because he does say a lot of things off the cuff. That's very true. But I always think it's important to make a distinction between what he says as reporters on an airplane and what he says ex cathedra. Because everything he said ex cathedra is completely in line with the Catholic Church teaching as the Pope and to be taken validly, right? We always need to put that in perspective, right? Because I think sometimes people critique him for what he says off the cuff, and rightly so. That's fine. You can do that. But you can't critique him for his role as the Holy Father, unless he does something that is explicitly against that role as the Holy Father, which he hasn't. Right? And we trust, because he's a guided by the Holy Spirit, he won't. Right? So I say all that just to kind of, you know, when we talk about these things when it comes to liturgy, tradition, we always have to take that in consideration and in context with what the Church allows and what the Church desires. But to go back to your original question, you know, I think this all kind of comes down to what the focus was compared to what was actually written. And I think we do that a lot. Like, even a great example of that, I think, is just this Fiducia Supplicans that just came out recently. I know we talked about this in other sessions before, but that's the document that talks about blessing, right? People were getting so hung up on this word couple. And it's like, now, even though the CDF has clarified that sense, I think even going back to the Lemorus Laetitia, right? So there's, if you read it, it's an amazing document. It's like, just makes sense. There's one footnote that people were focusing on where it was kind of ambiguous. I think that's a fair critique. But you also have to look at that in context with what the Church teaches. So do you guys know what I'm talking about when I say that? You guys know exactly? Okay.
I'm way behind all you guys.
There you go. Okay, all right, good. Yeah.
Don't
So Amoris Laetitia, Mel, came out shortly after the Holy Father was elevated. And it was kind of a document that was talking about the family. And if you read it, it's a beautiful exhortation about the sacrament of marriage and what that means and the goods of it and everything else, in line with other popes, Casti Connubii and other things have been written by other popes when it comes to marriage. Wonderful. There was a footnote, not even the main body, a footnote, where the Holy Father talks about irregular marriages. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah. Okay. So for those who maybe don't know, when we say the word irregular marriage, what we mean is those that are not married within the sacrament of marriage. Okay. Not and haven't been properly dispensed, whatever. Basically, what we're basically talking about is someone that's not necessarily actually married. That's kind of what it comes down to, right?
It's a marriage, not a civil union.
Well, yeah. So here's the thing, though. We have to be very careful when we use the word marriage, because boy. this could be a whole other
Get the
conversation.
shovel out because you're gonna.
No, this is good.
You
This
didn't
is
even
good.
get to
This could
chant
be
yet.
this could be a friends food faith all itself. Okay. So when I talk about the sacrament of marriage, right? That's when I have, let's say, a Catholic couple that comes to me. That's what we're shooting for, is a sacrament. Now, if we have, let's say, two atheists that never been baptized, don't believe in the faith, they go down to the justice of the peace and they get married. Is that a marriage?
In the eyes of the
In the
state,
eyes of the
yes.
state, yes. Not in the eyes of the church.
Yes.
But if
In
they
the eyes of
belong
the
to
church, okay,
why do
now,
they care?
here's the thing. It's not a sacrament, but it is a marriage.
Oh,
Even in the eyes of the church. Right? It may be a natural marriage, but it's a marriage. Right? There's a love. So in order to make a marriage, there has to be three things. Capability, meaning I know what I'm doing. I'm of a sound mind and will. I know what I'm saying yes to. Consent, meaning I'm actually giving rights to my body to this other person. And context, meaning I'm doing it in a way that I understand that's appropriate and right. Okay? All three things need to be present for you. Valid, meaning true marriage. Right? For Catholics, we understand that capability is going through the proper preparation, understanding what rights of marriage, what the goods of marriage are, that there's no defect of mind or will that's keeping you from doing that. Consent is the marriage vow, actually the form of the sacrament, the marriage vows. And that's done in the context of being witnessed by the church. So for Catholics, that is marriage. Nothing other than that, right? Everyone else, do whatever you want to do. If you're a Lutheran, whatever works for you works for you. We even still recognize it as a sacrament of marriage. Even when we're Lutherans, they're baptized, right? Baptism gives the sacramentality. So when I have a couple, let's say they're not, one's Catholic, one's not. Well, the Catholic party has the obligation to fulfill these requirements for it to be a valid, meaning true marriage, not just legal, not just sacramental, an actual marriage, right? So anything outside of that will be considered irregular. Okay, so if a Catholic and let's say an atheist or a Jewish person or whatever, they go get married in the justice of the peace. Well, now they can be dispensed from that form, meaning they can come to me and say, Father, you know what? This my spouse, they don't believe in the faith, they don't believe in the Trinity, but there'd be hostility if we were to get married in the church. Great, dispensed. Do whatever you need to do, right? That's a thing, right? And we would consider it to be a valid marriage, right? Cool. When you don't do that, it's invalid. It's irregular, right? So we're talking about those type of situations. So, or let's say you get divorced, you don't get annulment, they get married to somebody else. And let's say you have kids, right, with that person, or you're bringing kids into the marriage, from both parties. What the Holy Father wrote in Amoris Laetitia was that, maybe it could be a valid reason to share a bed or a room, even though you're not validly married, for the good of the family and the good of the children, it may be proper, not valid, proper, to share a bed. Now, what the Holy Father doesn't say, though, is it's good and moral to engage with your wife in that state, or this woman in that state, or that man in that state. But for the good of the family, maybe that'd be a good thing to do, right? Because we have to take that and understand what the church teaches. That, yeah, there could be examples and situations where, you know what, Father, we have to live in the same. It can be difficult. But yes, any minister that does those actual ministries, whether it be extraordinary minister, or if it's lector, if it's bringing up the gifts, if it's server, if it's even usher, those are ministries of the common priesthood of baptized people. And so, yeah, if you're ministering in that respect, you should be baptized. Now, here's the problem with this. As I'm observing through the year, I don't know if every one of that comes up is. I imagine the teachers do. I imagine the administration over there does, but maybe that has never actually been communicated. Fair. So that's responsibility falls on me. And again, there's this kind of like what's observed and what's actually needs to be done right now. Yeah, well, on me. So sure. Good.
Cool.
You bothered tonight?
Oh no, I love these. It's always fun. I always find these very fun. I don't know, they're always kind of good. Yeah.
So, concerned about you, are you taking days off?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lent might be difficult.
Half a day?
Yeah.
You need time for yourself.
Oh,
too.
sure. Yeah.
We
no,
don't want to
that's-
burn
no,
you
no,
out.
No, that's true. I mean, it's no, I mean, I found I'd be able to take a day more now as a parochial administrator than as an associate, because I have more control of my schedule. But no, I mean that's been something I've talked to my spiritual director. Actually, just came up today. I met with my mentor, and it's like I'm like, yeah, I'm taking one, and it's working. But yeah, with Lent, with fish fries and everything, and there's going to be 2 weekends where there's an abortion healing retreat, which I'm going to be, if I'm not here, I'm going to be there. And then also following that would be an awakenings retreat for the UMSL students. So if I'm not going to be here, I'm going to be there. So those are back-to-back weekends. So yeah, plus being Lent, it's going to be probably more difficult to find time.
Mondays.
Mondays?
Mondays.
Yeah, but then we also have a school board.
You can take the whole day.
Well, the other
We're
thing too is
just,
the other thing too during the week is unless we have mass every day anyway, and unless I find someone to come in and take my place, which is possible, I suppose. But I feel that is my responsibility.
Mhm.
That's my job as a pastor, to celebrate the mass every day for the people of the parish.
But you don't have to be at every school board. You could be. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying during Lent, it might be a good idea. Take Tuesday.
So what you're saying is, I should take
A
time
day.
off of. Would it be more penitential for me to take a day off or go to the school board meeting?
I think it would be more.
That's your
What is it?
decision.
See, right? Yeah, right. That's the problem. Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's two things you should always remember as a pastor. Take a day off and say thank you.
That's true. That's a good point. That's true. Yes. Well, good. Yeah, no. But yeah, usually my day off is from Friday afternoon basically after school lets out until I come back for confession on Saturday. So it's a 24-hour period.
Just as long as you're taking time.
Yeah. No, it's been good. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. I won't tell you where I go. I do
don't-
leave the parish, so
I
I
don't
do that.
care. I don't
I
care
do
where
that,
you go.
yes.
Just as
Oh,
long
yeah,
as you're
yeah.
taking
Yeah,
care
no,
of
I am.
yourself.
I am. That's good. Yeah.
So, more questions for
Great.
you. So, coming from presentation, part of our Sunday collection went to the missions.
Mm-hmm.
Are we still doing that?
The Sunday collection?
Yeah.
Not unless there's a special envelope or collection. No,
Yeah, no.
because we do have a missionary coming in June.
No, this was something presentation did they tithed it.
Oh,
And Father Dolan knows the percentage, I don't know it, and every year we would give to the mission.
oh well, every year we give the missions anyway. Typically, just because what
Not
happens
for a
is
missionary coming in.
no. What I'm saying is, so usually we give the missions anyway because oftentimes we have masses left over. So
How do you have masses
okay,
left over?
no, good. Yeah, no, that's good because okay. So for instance, canonically speaking,
Okay.
I can only take one stip, meaning
Stipend.
offering.
Okay.
Well, not a stipend. That's
Okay.
different.
Okay.
Stip is an offering. A stipend is what you pay what was it? Not a assassin. What do they call the people that you hire to fight wars?
Oh.
Hired to fight wars.
Yeah, so you like hire someone like in your army. It's not like they don't like raise you, hire someone else. But anyway, that's in the Latin language. A stipend is what you pay those that you hire to fight in your army. Stips is a free will offering. I can only take one free will offering per day from the parish. But on Sundays especially, I celebrate 2 masses. So one of those has to go somewhere. So who would it go to? Missions or the seminary? Well, but also sometimes you'll have somebody that gives an offering that wants to say, let's say, 50 masses. Well, if the calendar's already full for that year, I can't do those 50 masses. So we send those masses to the missions.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a presentation on, I don't know if it was 1% or whatever of the collections was set aside. And
I mean, we do that. I think we do that for Vincent de Paul.
you do.
Yeah, there's a certain percentage of the collection does go to Vincent de Paul.
Yeah, there's just so many things that are different between the two,
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to
Yeah,
figure
Yeah.
them out. It's just-
yeah,
Are
yeah.
you blessing throats?
Well, we don't have a mass on the 3rd, but the mass we have on the 3rd is a Sunday mass. And the directive that came from the Office of Worship was that if it falls on Sunday, you wouldn't bless throats. You do not.
Not even after Mass.
No.
And that's a change.
I don't know if it actually has been. I think some priests have been like, I'm going to bless throats anyway. I mean, unless you're like let's say you're at St. Blaise Church,
Which doesn't exist.
which does exist. So if you're at St. Blaise Church, you're still celebrating Solemnity that day, so you could still do it. But Sunday would take precedent, and so it's not the memorial St. Blaise you're celebrating on Saturday night. It's
You may need to explain that to a few people.
okay. I mean, that's fine.
Father Dolan always blessed the throats after Mass.
Even on Sunday.
On Sunday after Sunday Mass, yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a pastor. I'm just program administrator.
Uh,
But
I'm just
but
saying people may not understand.
Yeah, maybe.
That's all
maybe.
I'm saying.
No, that's a good point. Yeah.
Are you
that's-
blessing candles Friday?
Well, yeah, that
Okay.
actually is kind of us, right? So yeah, we're gonna do that. But yeah, Blaze is one of those things where it falls on those days. So we're like, well, I mean, we could have a special mass on Saturday, I suppose, but
That's your day off.
so I don't know.
Well, would you be able to do it Saturday night Mass?
No,
It's for
because
Sunday.
Saturday night, Sunday.
Oh,
Yeah.
But it's on the 3rd.
Sure,
Come on, if we're gonna
But-
be
but
technicalities.
but liturgically
here.
speaking,
Oh, that's true.
right? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
how
yeah,
it'll
yeah.
work, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's not by the calendar; it's by the liturgical calendar, and that's how we're going. Right?
I guess if you want your throats blessed, you find a Saturday morning Mass.
That's what you have to do. So there's plenty of those around though too.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's kind of shame. I kind
Comment.
of like that. I always like that tradition, the blessing throw. That was kind of neat. I was kind of like that, but you know, office of worship.
I think the convent had another
So
weekend.
during Triduum, are you doing morning prayer?
Well, I guess it's a question for others. So like I don't know if we've done what's been done in the past. I guess a presentation they did was that on Thursday or Friday, Saturday?
We did it
All
here
of them?
All of them.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
too. We did it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Cool. Then sure.
There wasn't Mass, so they did.
Right. Because the Chrism Mass is at 10, so I guess we'll have to do it like at 8. Is that usually what's been done?
On Thursday.
On Thursday
Holy
morning?
Thursday.
What was that?
I don't know that he did it on.
No, they did Holy Thursday at presentation,
Mhm.
and that was like at what
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Time the Mass usually was. And
Okay.
then he left right from there to go to the.
Yeah. Also, we have to maybe share the same bed. The church recognizes maybe legitimate reasons for that, right? Very few and far between, but maybe there are legitimate reasons. And so for that, those matters, we still have to understand though, you're not married, and any sexual act within that, outside of that bond, is immoral. And so maybe it's going to be much more difficult for you to maintain that chastity, you know. And if you're struggling, we have a great sacrament for that too, right? That can help you with that as well. And you should talk to the priest and try to find a way forward that's beneficial, that actually upholding your dignity as a human person and your moral life. Maybe a lot of work, but I would hope if you really love this person, it'd be worth it, right? Again, that's what the church teaches. That's how we have to look at those things, the Holy Five things said, even within those documents, right? And it was clarified even later that, yeah, that's what I meant. Sure, because that's what the church teaches. You can't teach anything other than what the church teaches, right? To that same point, I think a lot of these things are coming out with fiducia supplicans. We also have to look into what the church teaches. And when it comes to blessings, whether you're in a group or individually, the point of a blessing is to receive deeper grace in the sacraments. Sacramentals are meant to lead to the sacraments, right? So a blessing is meant for you to receive a deeper grace in the sacraments you receive. So I made this distinction, I think, in our last discussion, we brought this up, was before this even came out. If I had, let's say, two men that came to me and say, Father, we are living in a civil union. Now we're doing this because, well, you know what, we want to share benefits. He has some health problems, but also so I can see him in the hospital if he gets sick, because otherwise they won't let us in. We're trying to maintain chastity, right? We're living in separate beds. We're living in separate rooms in our house. We understand what the church teaches, and we understand that, and we agree with it. Can we have a blessing to help us do better in that? Yeah, sure. Let's do it, right? That's much different than, Father, we're in civil union. We don't care what the church teaches. We want you to bless us. No, right? Right. So the context and the intention matters. Now it's been brought up, like, what if they lie to you? Well, that's not on me.
That's on them.
That's on them. You know, I'm not blessing their marriage regardless. I'm not blessing them as a couple. I'm blessing them as individuals in this group of two, right?
And that's the key. You're not performing a ceremony and blessing the marriage. You're
Yeah.
blessing the people. You could bless the pets.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You could bless a car.
Well,
You
and
could bless a
yeah.
house.
And to this point, I think, I mean, and that's the other thing why I think the Holy Father's getting a bad rap on this, because if you actually read that document, it goes to great lengths even to make
does.
distinctions between what the circumstances even are.
Mhm.
And it's
And,
available.
Yeah, and that's like you
But
to
that
the
doesn't
point,
get a
like, you
short
can't be
little
wearing
soundbite.
tuxes, right? Yeah, right. I mean, to the point where you can't be wearing tuxes or like dress if you're going to a wedding.
Yes.
And it's like, well, all right, that's pretty clear to me. So I think a lot of this is just, unfortunately, I think politically charged. And that's unfortunate that people of faith are letting that,
Read the document.
yeah.
Inform
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. And even some of the things that are coming out of it. I mean, I don't think the media really helps a lot of these things.
Well, the
Um,
media's headline
Mhm.
was one thing, and they included the document. And if you read the document,
Right.
it was
It doesn't make sense
clear.
to hell, yeah.
Right.
Well, even some things, I know there was a big headline coming out with probably the African bishops. You know, the headlines say that they've rejected the document. Well, they can't, first off. But I mean, but then we start looking into it, it's like they're not saying they reject it. They're calling for people to be their priests to be prudent in how they do it, which is
Completely different.
sure good. Yes, exactly. That's what we all want for this, right? It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating. Yeah.
And now the second part of your question, chant.
Chant, yeah. So
Chant.
again, you know, chant is one of those things that have always been upheld, you know, in the church that from the time of Gregory the Great on, you know, Gregorian chant, right? That comes from Saint Gregory. So again, back to this whole notion of when people started being evangelized, going out on missionary work. Well, Gregory happened to be the Pope, and he really developed this chant that was used in liturgy, and so from then on, it's always been used, right? But also, I think the other thing about chant is that, you know, from a practical standpoint, it's easy to do.
A simple chant.
Yeah,
is-
yeah. Not only people, I mean,
Yeah.
so even like
Mhm.
polyphony, right? I mean, sure, okay, that can be a little more difficult, but simple
It is,
chant is
yeah.
not
Yeah.
very hard to do.
If you have the notes in front of you and the one that you're supposed
Right.
to hold is full,
Right.
it's simple.
I mean, even the point too, where if you start and end on the right note, it's very simple.
It is.
Everything in the middle, you
Yeah,
do whatever you
it's
want.
the
You know,
same.
yeah, right, yeah.
Are the same.
Yeah, right. But more probably, you know, more theologically speaking, though, and this is really goes back to Augustine. You know, Augustine talks about those who sing pray twice, right? That we're engaging with the angelic choirs, and we actually use our gift of our voice to praise God, right?
Mhm.
Whether you can sing well or not. Now you could say, well, maybe I don't sing well, and okay,
That's
There's-
where the people who listen pray twice.
Yeah, right.
One that they hear something different than what they're actually hearing.
Sure, yeah, So yeah, so I mean, all these things to say that, but again, even then, chant is an option, right? Because, and again, even at that point, the focus was not so much on chant and these organ and these other, things have been traditionally used in churches for, centuries, but when they say about anything else that is dignified for the space, well, what does that mean, right? I mean, you can even go as far as saying like, well, you look back in the Old Testament, cymbals and bagpipes and flutes, sure, right? String instruments, lutes, harps, yeah, cool, right? Those are all liturgical, and yeah, they're all biblical, so awesome. Then you start getting to things like drums, maybe piano. Well, I mean, pianos weren't around back in the that time, but maybe, So that's why you start getting these other things like, okay, what about a bass guitar? well, I mean, now we're starting to get into the ambiguous territory, right? And again, the other thing we have to take into consideration when it comes to these things is the space, right? So what is the space designed for? And I think it's kind of funny, like, I think even this church here, it's not necessarily designed for amplification, right? And so we have microphones because people can't hear and help them, sure, but it wasn't designed for that. And also, like, where you put these instruments is also dependent on the space. So there's a reason we have choir lofts, because the design is such that where that can be the best place to hear these things, right? So put them other places, even though that may be, people can see them, okay, but audibly, that may not be the best place to be, right? And all that needs to be discerned and taken into account when you talk about music in the liturgy, right? Whether it be chant or anything else. So, yeah, so I think there's a lot, again, that comes on the focus on, well, what is the tradition that was upheld in these documents, and what has been the allowance? And there's more looking at the allowance there has been on what's been upheld. Now, to that point, though, I mean, just a couple years, 2020, which is funny because I didn't even know this document came out, but the bishops of the United States put a document out when it came to liturgical music. And what's interesting is they were specifically looking at different hymns and songs. And what's really fascinating is they were naming names, explicitly songs that shouldn't be used because of the theological points they're trying to make that are not in line with Catholic teaching. Not necessarily the musicianship or the actual technical ability. It's really more the theological context behind it. So I thought that was actually very interesting that they did that, because, boy, you can maybe make some enemies by naming names in that respect. Yeah. And there's some songs on there that, like, I grew up with, and it's like, I didn't necessarily mind them, but then it's like, oh, I kind of see what we're getting at here, right? So, yeah, I think that's, so up until then, though, I think there was a lot of open questions when it comes to these things, Dan, which is why I think you started to see more of a influx of different things in the liturgy when it came to that. Okay. Yeah, I'm not opposed. I mean, I haven't prayed anyway, so it's fine with me.
I know you did it Friday.
Yeah, I mean, I know in the past what I've done in former parishes, especially when it came to Holy Saturday, I would do morning prayer with the catechumens and candidates. Then we would actually do a practicum for the Vigil Mass on Saturday morning. And I also typically ask selectors and all the ministers to be there too, not the extraordinary ministers, but like servers, just so we can get an understanding of when things happen when.
But if we have a deacon, he could do it Thursday if you had to go to the Mass.
Yes, but also the deacons typically go to the Chrism Mass too. It's supposed to be like the entire clergy, all the clergy are there. It's sort of like a big deal.
It's a real big deal.
Yeah.
I love it.
It is beautiful. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Well, maybe your deacon will want to do morning prayer before every Mass.
I mean, if I do morning prayer at 8 o'clock, that's fine. Plenty of time. It's only, it takes about 20 minutes. Even if you chant it and sing it, it takes like 20, 25. And so if I leave at 8:30, I get down to the cathedral at 9. That's plenty of time for the prison mass. We can make it work. Make it fun. But that'll be more of a as we go, figure that out.
Just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to it. Although did the evening prayer? Didn't you evening prayer though?
Nobody.
Well, you didn't. Well,
Thursday.
you don't have to do it Thursday. Well, okay.
We did
If
do
you go to the
Thursday.
Mass of the Lord's Supper, if you go to the
You
Letters of the
don't
Cross,
do-
and if you go,
You don't do evening.
you don't do evening
That's
prayer. You don't.
evening
You don't
prayer.
have to do evening
It
prayer.
doesn't conclude. It
Yes, you don't
continues.
have to
But
do
night
evening prayer.
prayer. But then
Night prayer you would do.
Night prayer.
Um,
Yeah.
What about? Has there ever been like a on Good Friday into Saturday a matins and then a morning prayer? So that takes the place of the old Tenebrae.
Good Friday morning was morning.
No, I mean Good Friday night into Saturday morning.
So like 10 o'clock, midnight? What are you talking here?
Let's say 11
Hours?
o'clock, and
11
then
o'clock.
you would follow that up by morning prayer at midnight on Holy Saturday.
Mm-mm.
No.
It hasn't been done. It doesn't mean that it.
I do that in I do that in North Parish.
No.
It's just
Yeah.
that takes place with the old Tenebrae.
We
Mhm.
just did it.
Tenebrae is no longer done. It's been suppressed, but you do
So-
have the option of doing matins with or officer readings with morning prayer on that night.
No, we didn't.
Because seminarians always do it at the wrong time.
Thursday was like
Yeah.
11 o'clock, I think, Father must have been.
Yeah,
Like-
with night prayers. No, night prayer is night prayer. No, you do night prayer. Yeah, right,
Thursday,
yeah.
only
Yeah.
Thursday though.
Okay,
Usually
yeah.
Friday.
This would be like night prayer would be done. Okay, so like this would be night prayer would be done before that on Good Friday, and then you'd do officer readings like late on Friday, and
Opposite
then
readings for Saturday or for Friday? Which?
either.
Okay.
Either.
Yeah.
And then you would do. I would probably do it for Holy Saturday because by
Yeah.
that time it's Friday.
Yeah.
But then you do follow that up with morning prayer on.
So-
Probably more proper to do office readings on Friday and then morning
Morning
prayer,
prayer.
but you could do either one. The only thing the difference would be if you did officer readings on Friday and then morning prayer. You have to start morning prayer with the obituary, which isn't a big deal, but usually
I
doesn't
just
happen.
remember how tired you were.
So do you do?
Yeah, but here's the thing: Good Friday after 7 o'clock, after 7 o'clock veneration, I won't have anything until 8 o'clock on Saturday.
Yeah.
So I could sleep in on Saturday morning, ready to go by 8 o'clock on Saturday night. I don't know how people will join me that night, but I mean, it's, I don't know. That's interesting. I was just wondering, yeah. So morning prayer is done every morning of Triduum at presentation.
You know, I'm getting presentation and Holy Trinity.
Okay. Okay.
Kind of merged because
Okay.
during COVID things weren't
Right.
things weren't done.
Things are
We
different, yeah,
always
yeah.
did it at Holy Trinity.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had too many parishes in the last couple.
I'll talk to Father Dolan too, see what he says. But at here they've only had it on Saturday morning, Friday morning.
Because there's no.
There's nothing
morning
until 7.
mass.
Yeah, right. There's nothing
There's
until
no
7.
morning mass
Right.
on Friday, Good
No
Friday.
mass
Yeah.
anyway
That's right.
on Friday.
So Father did morning prayer.
Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah,
I
we
think-
can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So did you say they do compline here on Holy Thursday evening?
Usually would end the night because after
After you go travel around the
yeah.
adoration everywhere.
yeah, we would end the night usually with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes
Father
sense.
Nick did it at
Then kick everyone out and put Jesus back in
11
the
or
in the
11:30.
Bill used to
vestibule.
sing with his guitar.
Yes, he did.
Who would do it?
Father Bill, the Kemp.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah. He probably took his guitar with him.
All right. Good.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to formulate that. I'm looking forward to that now and trying to get some understanding. Right, we just kind of got Lent finalized, and now we're kind of looking ahead to Triduum here in the next few weeks, probably. So, I'm guessing I'll have to get servers together. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that my job? Okay.
No,
Good.
I mean, we can. We'll have to just get volunteers.
Okay.
We might have to have a little special training.
I can't handpick them.
Sure you can.
Sure.
Great.
Mhm.
Actually, to tell you the truth, I've been impressed with the servers that we've had.
Yeah.
They've been good.
The poor, I'm not gonna say. this.
I know you're talking about the master ceremonies on Saturday.
No.
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 No. Okay. All right.
I'm not gonna say it on.
Okay. Good. Yeah. I mean, from what the bishop told me, he said he did fine for his age. It was good. We're developing. It's good. That was kind of a start to one of the things I want to do is develop a master ceremonies program here. And I usually am looking more high school age kids to do that. Yeah, yeah. So but that was sort of a start because the person that I picked for that, I see something there which could be developed.
Yeah,
So.
I think that they can, I mean, we've had special training in the past for them.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually found some cassocks and surplices though,
Mhm.
which would be great for master ceremonies.
Mhm.
So perfect.
I think there's some of the folks in the office too.
Oh yeah. Are they bigger?
They're not real big, but
Okay. Yeah, I only get some for like high school kids.
yeah, they might be.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I can just grab them.
Good.
Okay.
Great. Well, thanks for coming, everybody.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Next week will be Friends from Faith. I'll report what I'm going to talk about. I'm not really sure yet what it's going to be. Any suggestions for the discussion for next week?
Email you something.
Okay, great. Very good. All right. We kind of went through. We started with music. Then we talked about the Eucharist last month. Marriage might be a good one.
Mm.
Why is marriage a sacrament? That might be a good discussion. Okay.
I was even
Got
thinking
it.
about
Mm.
some of the things we do at Mass and why we do them.
Okay.
Like it's not in the rubrics when at the gospel, gonna be in my mind, in my lips, and in my heart. People don't know
That
that,
might be in the germ.
but ordinary people.
Right.
And there's a lot of those things. Why you bow during the Gloria.
Oh yeah. That's in the rubric of the old rite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right, yeah,
So
yeah.
I am just saying
Yeah,
those
yeah.
kind of things
Right.
would be
Good. Yeah.
educational,
Yeah. We can maybe look at that.
the correct way to genuflect.
Yeah. I mean, we could do that too. I'm see like that's more discussion. I'm looking at more the whys of things.
The whys.
Liturgical
Yeah.
committee.
So I mean, we could look at that. And a lot of those we could do with the whys. I don't know.
I just thought you asked.
Yeah. No. Thank you.
So,
Yeah. That's
I
good.
think those are
Maybe we
good,
could look at that.
bulletin.
Maybe we could also do
column.
like we could also maybe look at Lenten practices.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
'Cause
Yeah.
that'll be the first one.
Because there's three.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about just like but everything like in Lent, like even liturgically, what we do with certain things, right? Yeah, so we can maybe look at that.
Well, you
Oh,
can
that would
address
be
some
good.
of
Oh.
those things you just brought up
Yeah.
in your column and just say, hey, you know,
I don't know, that'd be a long column.
It will.
Uh-huh.
one a day, one time.
Oh,
Like if the correct way to genuflect.
oh, yeah, yeah.
You know,
Okay,
just
yeah.
some